Alright, so in the previous video, we created the create conversation page, and in this video, we're just going to create the view for the messages page, or actually for the conversation page. So let's get straight into the code. In this tutorial, I'll create two components. One of them is named messages container.svelte, and the other one is named messages message input container.svelte. So now, let's remove this file and let's just open the message container.svelte. And before we do anything, let's open up the terminal and let's run npm run dev. And let's also open up another terminal, open Pocketbase, and run /Pocketbase serve. Now close the terminal. And now let's create a script with the lang property set to TS. And now let's export, let's have a property called auth model, which is going to be a user. And then let's export another property, there's going to be a conversation. And then we're going to create two variables, one called scroll view, which is just going to be a reference to the scroll view. And the reason we keep a reference to scroll view is because whenever we send a message, we want to scroll down to see the message for a user. So we're also going to create another variable called show remove button is string or undefined. And this is basically when you hover a button, which button do you show the delete button for? And that's the variable for it. And now let's create a reactive statement. Message groups is equal to conversation and so basically the message groups is just whenever a user sends more than one message at once or like following each other, then that's called a message group. So if they send 3 messages back to back, that's a message group. So messages dot slice dot reverse dot reduce, and there's gonna be a message array. Sure to import the message. Then we're just gonna say previous value and current value. And now for the default value, it's just gonna be an empty array. So now we say if the previous value dot length is equal to 0, that means if is the first one in the state, we just return an array with array inside, and the array inside has the current value inside of it. So then if we're not in the first one, we say current group index is equal to previous value dot length minus 1 const current message index is equal to previous value current group index dot length minus 1. And now we're going to get a reference to the message. So const message is equal to previous value current message index and also current group index. No, wait. Current message index and then current group index. So now we say if the message of the user, so if the user ID is equal to the same one of the current value, so current value dot user ID. So if they have the same author, we're just gonna say previous value current group index dot push current value. Else we just say previous value dot push an array with the current value inside. So we just return the previous value. So then below is the reactive statement. Let's create another reactive statement. We say if message groups and scroll view, we use the tick function to make sure we get a frame for animation. because if we don't, the actual scrolling will not work. So then we get the tick, and then we also need to check it again. So if message groups and scroll view, then we say scroll view dot scroll to, and then we say top is equal to scroll view dot height. No, scroll height. And then we also say behavior is smooth. So you can see we're getting a reference to the message groups and the scroll view. So whenever the message groups update, we get a tick, and then we check it again, and then we just scroll to the bottom. So then let's do it on mount, and we're saying if the scroll view is not null, we say scroll view dot scroll to, the same thing, top scroll view dot scroll height, but we're not gonna give it any smooth behavior because we want it to be instantaneous. So then in the markup, let's create a if block. It's gonna be a reference to the PB store, so we're gonna make sure that the PB store actually has a value in it. So we're gonna create a section with the class of messages container, and we're gonna bind this to the scroll view. So let's create a each block inside of this section, saying that the message groups and the item is gonna be message group. So let's get a constant at const message user, so we get a reference to the current user of the actual message group. Message group 0 dot user ID. So then let's create a message group div. So inside the message group, we create a if block, and then we say message group 0 dot user ID does not equal to auth model dot ID. So if this user is not actually us, we create a div with the message image, and then we create an if else block. So you can see that we're checking to see if we're actually the user, and if we're not, we show the image of the user alongside with the message. So let's actually create the logic. So then we say message user. We got to make sure the message user is actually valid. And then we say message user dot photo. So we're going to make sure that they actually have a photo. We're going to create an image. $pb dot files dot get URL message user. And for the alt, we just say message user dot name. And we also gotta say message user dot photo inside the get URL method. So then, if they don't actually have a valid photo, we create an icon div that contains the FA user circle. So let's import it right now. So now, below this if, we create a user messages container, and we create a if block message user. So we gotta make sure that the message user is not null, and that the message user dot ID is not equal to auth model dot ID. So we make sure that it's not actually the user. So we create a span with the class of name. Inside here we say message user dot name or unknown name. So let's create as each block. And here we're gonna loop over the message group to actually see the real messages. So in here, let's do message container, and it's gonna be class primary message dot user ID is equal to auth model dot ID. So if the message is actually sent by us, we're gonna show that it is a primary message. So we say on mouse enter. There's gonna be a function that says show remove button is equal to message dot ID, and then on mouse leave. Let's make sure to remove this. We're gonna make sure that show remove button is equal to undefined. So inside of this div, we're gonna create an if block, checking if the message.userID is equal to ours. So if message.userID is equal to auth model.id and show remove button is equal to message.id. We're just gonna show a form with the action set to at page.url.path name. Let's import the page store. Now let's make sure to take off this accessibility error. So the action is gonna be to a form that we're gonna create in the next episode, the remove message form. So in here, we're gonna create a method of post, a transition of fly with an X property set to 20 and duration set to 150. And also we're gonna use enhance. So now I'm gonna create an input with a type of hidden, and the name is just gonna be message ID, and the value is gonna be a message.id. So we're gonna create a button with an icon that says IO MD trash. Let's import it right now. So now below this if block, let's create a message div. So right here, we're gonna do as if block. Say message dot content type is equal to image. Then we gotta say else. Then let's create an image with the source set to the message content. So we're gonna do $pb dot files dot get URL conversation, and then message dot content, and the alt is gonna be the message dot content. So for the span, we're just gonna say message dot content, because if it's not an image, it's actually just a text, so we just display it in a span. So now below this, we create another span with a class of message date. And then inside here, we're going to create a new date with the message dot created on it. Dot to locale time string with an empty array. And we just say the hour is 2-digit and that the minute is also 2-digit. So you see that we're actually getting the time of the message created, and we're converting it just to an hour and minute. So now below the message div, let's get this and let's copy and paste it down like so. So then right here, we're going to say not, and we're also going to say if we are an admin, so conversation.admins.includes auth model.id, and we're just going to show this, and this is going to be -20. And that's also going to be IOMD trash. So now let's go over to GitHub to get the styles for the actual page. So now once you have it open, just go over here, copy and paste, and that should be all. So now we can close this file. So now let's go to the message input container. Let's create a script with the lang property set to TS, and then we're going to create a few inputs. So message input is going to be an empty string, let conversation, just conversation or undefined, let image send open is equal to false. we're also gonna let submitting image is equal to false. And then we're gonna create a reactive statement saying that if the converse like so, and then let's just go like this. So inside here, we're just gonna create a constant called conversation found is equal to $ conversation store dot find item, and then item dot id has to equal to $page dot params dot conversation id. So in here, let's just do import the conversation, and that's really all the logic for this component. So in here, let's just create a section with a class of message. So section dot message input container, and here let's create a div with the class of image send container, and then we say if submitting image or image send open. So when we say form with a class of image send, it has an action set to the $page dot url dot path name !/ send image. So all of these form actions we're going to create in the next video. So here the method is going to be post. I'm also going to do enc type of multi-part form data because we want to send messages. And below everything, we're just going to use enhance is equal to a function, and then we say submitting image is equal to true, and we return. And once we finish submitting the image, we just say submitting image is equal to false, and also image send open is equal to true, false. So now in this form, we're just going to create a P that says choose a file. Oh, and I forgot. We're going to create transition of fly. So right here, we're going to set the Y to 20 and the duration to 150. So now we're going to choose a file. We're going to say input with the name of photo. So right here, let's create this. And let's remove this ID property. And we're going to say that we accept the same image types that we created in the first episode. The second one, which is going to be image.jpg, image/png, image/svg, and also image/gif, and image/webp. So now here we're going to say button disabled. We're going to say submit, and we're going to disable this button if the submitting image is equal to true. So right here you see that we choose a file. We actually get the file, and we make sure that the submitting image is disabled if we're actually submitting another image, because we don't want to submit multiple images in the same form. So now below this if block, we're going to create a button with the class of add button, and if we click this button, we're just going to say image send open is equal to not image send open. So now let's have a div with the icon class dot icon. We're going to say class open is equal to image send open, and right here, if the image is sent open, we're just going to twist it a few times to make it show an X, because this icon is going to be a plus icon. You're going to see there's going to be IOMD add. So let's import this icon. So now let's go right here and let's create a form below this button. Form post with the method of post, and this is going to be the action is going to be to the $page dot URL dot path name. question mark slash send message. And remember, all of these form actions we're going to create in the next video. So then the class for this form is going to be class message form. And we're also going to make sure to use the use enhance. And this use enhance is just going to return an empty function. That's just going to say message input is equal to nothing. So let's create an input with a type of text, the name of message, and also the class of message input. So then let's remove this ID. So we're going to say placeholder is equal to type a message, and also we're going to bind the value to the message input. And the reason we bind the value to the message input is because we don't actually want to edit it. We just want to make sure that it's actually valid. It's actually a valid input. So we say button disabled. And we're gonna mark it as disabled if the message input is equal to an empty string. So we're just gonna say this is the iOS send icon. So let's import it right now. Now I was looking through the code and I found out that this conversation is actually a redundant variable and we don't need it. So let's remove this. So we just need these three. And let's remove this right here. So now let's go over to GitHub at message input container.svelte. Let's copy the styles, and then we're gonna paste them into the container. Oh, I found the error. Right here, you see this form. Let's move it below this div. So now we can close this message, we can close this component, and then in the conversations folder, let's create a new folder, and we're gonna say bracket conversation underscore ID. Let's just go and let's create a new file called pluspage.svelte. And here, let's create a script with the language property set to TS. So let's create two properties. One is the page data. And then we're going to also let form is equal to action data, because we're going to take. So then we're going to say let show conversation settings is equal to false. And we're also going to create a conversation variable. Const conversation is equal to the conversation or undefined. Then we're just going to say reactive declaration saying that if the conversation, just to get the autocomplete on the action data, let's go over to the folder of the conversation ID and let's create a new file called pluspage.server.ts. And here, let's just export const actions is equal to an empty object. Let's close this and let's import the type. So then if the conversation store is actually true, or not true, not null, found is equal to $conversation store dot find, and we just say item dot ID has to equal to the $page, so page store dot params dot conversation ID, and then we just set the conversation to conversation found. So you see, we loop through the conversation store and we find the conversation, and we set the conversation to the conversation that's found. So now we say svelte head, and then we create an as if block, no, an as if else. So then if we're in the browser, we say that the conversation, we create another as if else block, and then we say if we ask if the conversation is actually not null, So let's create a title for each one of these. And this is actually going to be inside of this one. And right here, if we're not in the browser, we just say loading conversation. And if the conversation is null but we're inside the browser, we say no conversation found. And if the conversation is found, we just show the conversation name. So now, right here, we're going to say Svelte document. And we're going to add an event listener to the Svelte document. We're going to say on key down. We're going to have an event. We're going to say if we show the conversation settings. And inside this, we say if event.key is equal to escape. We say event.prevent default. And we close the conversation settings. So we say show conversation settings is equal to false. So now inside of here, let's create a as if block. So then we check if the conversation is actually true and that the PB store is actually not null. So import it manually like this. So next to conversation store, we can say PB. So now if the conversation is not null and the inside here, let's create an else. And inside the else, we actually say that the conversation and the PB store are null. One of them is null. So the section is going to be no conversation found. And inside here, we're going to create a span with an A. So the span is going to say no conversation found. And also the href A is just going to show or link to the slash. So we could go home. So inside of the if block, we create a div with the class of conversation container. So inside here, we create a header. We create a header that contains a section with the class of conversation information. And inside here, we also have a nav next to the conversation. The section. So inside of the section, we created A with the href set to slash dot backlink. So inside of here, we say div dot icon, and we're gonna add the MD arrow back icon. So let's import that right now. So now below this anchor tag, let's create a div with the conversation image, and we're gonna say as if else block. Now we check if the conversation photo is actually not null and that the conversation photo dot length is greater than 0. So we make sure to check it. So here we can say like this. So now we say inside of the if block, we say image with the source set to $pb dot get file URL conversation and the conversation photo. And the alternative is going to be just the conversation name. So then the else, we just say dot icon. And inside here, we just say MD group. Let's import this right now. So now below this div, let's create a H1 that says conversation that has the content of conversation dot name. So you can see this is only going to show for mobile, but inherently on all devices, we're going to show the photo of the conversation. And if the conversation photo does not exist, we're just going to show an MD group, a default icon, and we're just going to show the conversation name inside the header. So inside the nav, we're going to have a button with the class of settings. And when we click this button, we want to say that we show conversation settings is equal to true. And then we also say we create an icon div. We say IOMD settings. So now below this header, we're going to add the messages container. And below this, we say messages, message input container. In here, let's add the property. So the auth model is going to be data.auth model. And we're also going to show the conversation. And now, let's go over to GitHub. Let's go to routes, app, conversations, right here, and go to plus page of Svelte. And let's do style. Let's import this. Let's copy this. And let's paste it. Let's make sure to add this right here. Oh, and let's also fix this typo. So now, once you do this, you can close this file. And you can open up localhost. So now you can see that we have the image right here, the group, because we don't actually have the message input. So you can see we can actually have the choose a file form. We'd also type a message. We can send it, but it's not going to work because we don't actually have the form actions. So thank you for watching this video. If you have any feedback, comment down below, like, subscribe, and comment.